And I've been in the industry long enough that Google was just starting out. And we started to talk about Google as a competitor. The thing that has been persistent through my career is that people still see the library as the source of the best information. That has not changed over 20 or 25 years of working with Google. They still know that the library is their trusted partner in their knowledge journey. So what we have is a unique opportunity as librarians to find that sweet spot with the solutions that we deliver, where we can find the intersection of that great user experience that optimizes that really rich, really trusted content that the library provides. And in that space, we find trust, and we find that unique value proposition of the librarian. And I am the daughter of a librarian. I've been in libraries all my life, and that's the thing that I'm passionate about, that has always been important to me about my work in the library industry, is serving the community and delivering that authoritative, trusted experience. So that's the one place where libraries and only libraries can lead. So as I said, libraries have the most trusted sources, but are the hardest to use. And there's really a clear sort of push and pull. The more trustworthy the source, and this graph is one from our research, the more trusted the source, the harder it is, the more barriers we put, the more complicated the user interface that we offer. The easier that the source is to use, the harder it is to find information that you need and that you trust. So how do we balance that as we move forward? How do we start to address the gap that exists in the library space? So I think that this requires a little bit of a rethinking of our approach to the way that we manage our collections, first of all, and the way that we expose those collections to our users. So library solutions today are really inventory-centric, and our discovery interfaces are really about managing and exposing our inventories. Whether they're print or electronic, it's about finding the one thing among the many. And we talk a lot about known item searches and relevance ranking that surfaces those most appropriate resources to the top of the list. But we're working with a list. We're working with a very linear set of results. And again, it's about finding that one thing that matches the user's need and sending them on their way. But as we look to the future, the real goal, I think, from a library systems standpoint, is to manage and expose knowledge. Isn't that really what we do? We've become these kind of warehouses of books and warehouses of resources. And yes, we want to provide access to them, but we're providing access to those resources because we want to enable access to knowledge. We want to enable the user's learning journey and their knowledge exploration. And from when you find one thing that's like, yes, this is a great resource that matches my needs, being able to explore and understand many. So it's really about building a network of connections and a network of context that we can insert the user into and then facilitate a journey across resources, the people who create those resources, and the concepts that describe what those resources are about. So I'm going to show you a couple of screenshots of the Inspire Discovery interface that we've been building and talk a little bit about how we're doing it. And then I'm going to turn things over to Stephanie, who's going to drill in a little bit more and talk about both their experience at Cairn as a development partner, but also the feedback that they've been getting from their users as they've been rolling the system out. So the first screen that I'm showing you here is a fairly traditional search and find experience. We thought that was an important starting point. People come into the library looking for something. And so I want to key in my terms. In this case, I looked up social media and democracy, and I get a set of results back. That result set includes both books and articles and other kinds of media and assets and resources that the library stewards and delivers to its users. And I can do all of the things you would expect to do in a normal discovery solution, right? I can log in, I can make a request for a book, I can see all the items that I have checked out, I can see more detailed, descriptive information about the resources. But we want to do more than that. We want to deliver a richer, more contextualized experience. And so the next thing that I can do is from one of those resources, Republic, Divided Democracy in the Age of Social Media, I can click on that resource and it takes me to a resource card. I see additional descriptive information about the particular resource, and then down below I can see additional related resources. So recommendations that are driven by the contextual connections that exist in our MARC data, and I'm going to come back and talk about that in a few moments. So a very visual way of presenting other related resources. Now here's where we go in a little bit different direction. What we're doing here is visualizing relationships, and we do that using what we call the context wheel. So behind the scenes we have a native linked data database called the context engine that associates resources, persons, and concepts. And in this particular case, I'm looking at the same title as I was looking at before, Republic of Divided Democracy. I can see on the left hand of the context wheel the contributors to that resource. In this case, it's just one, Cass Sunstein as the author. If it was a book that had chapters by multiple authors, or there were additional 700 fields, all of those contributors would display on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, I have all of the subject headings or concepts that were associated with this. And the size of the dots here is really important. It tells me how frequently each of those persons or concepts appears in the context engine. So it gives me a really quick visual indicator of the common terms that are used to describe this particular work. Now if I move to the next step, let's say I wanted from that screen to look at internet political aspects. I found this great book, and it's described by this concept of internet political aspects. I can recenter the wheel and put that particular concept at the center of the wheel. And you'll notice that things change. Around the outside on the left-hand side, I have all of my contributors again. The size of the dot here tells me about how frequently that particular contributor is writing about books or writing about resources about internet political aspects. On the right-hand side, same thing, internet social aspects, political participation technology, and so on. Size of the dot indicates frequency of co-occurrence of those two terms. And so I can start to explore. Maybe I didn't know that freedom of information was related to this. Maybe I didn't know that internet and activism was a way of characterizing an intellectual interest that I had. Maybe I didn't know these two things were related or that this even existed. And so it's opening up this new set of pathways for me to explore. So the next screen shows adding an additional concept, refining that context wheel again, showing me who's doing the most frequent writing on these two topics. In intersection, here are the other terms that co-occur frequently. And I can continue turning and shifting and navigating through the intersection of these concepts. I can do the same thing with people as well. And at the end of the day, I always want to resolve back to a list of resources, because what we want to do is deliver the information to the user. And so in this case, I have 4 books that come back, and I can go ahead and place a request. So those are the books that have both internet political aspects and internet political activism associated with them. So how are we making that happen? It is happening with your library data that you have made investments in for a really long time. And I always like to go back to the card catalog here because there's something that's really tightly connected. If you think about how we've had cards as objects, think about the firm as a record for the resource by John Grisham. It's an object. There's a card that represents that resource. There's a card for John Grisham as a person, so an object that represents that. Down at the bottom, 2 additional cards for concepts, subjects, government investigators fiction, and organized crime fiction. So each of these things in the card catalog is represented as an object. And now I can start to think about tying a piece of string, going back really analog, between the firm and John Grisham. John Grisham is also tied to the Pelican Brief and the Lincoln Lawyer and additional resources. Same way that firm is tied to government investigators fiction, it's tied to other concepts, other resources are tied. So you start to build out this really rich network of information that I can kind of put the user into and allow them to explore. So how do we do this? One of the challenges when we move from the card catalog to MARC records is that we took all of that sort of different objects and the connections and we smushed it into a really flat record. And that really flat record has served us well in a lot of respects for a really long time. But it's not serving us so well anymore. So what we're doing is behind the scenes in the context engine, as we ingest your library's data into the Inspire Discovery platform and into the context engine, we're actually breaking that MARC record up, following the BIBFRAME model, and we take the information about the resource, so the 245, 250, 260, and so on, and we add that to a resource object. We take the 6.5x fields, we break those apart, and we create individual objects representing each of those concepts. And what we're actually doing as well is preceding with LC subject authorities, name authorities, other authority files, so that what we really want to do is link to an existing authority record. And so you're getting the benefit of automated authority control in your discovery environment. And then finally, in this case, this one's pretty simple, and taking the 100 field and turning that into an object that represents the author, John Grisham. Again, I could pull from the 700 field, I could pull from the 505 if you had one that included authors for chapter level works. And I'm linking them all back together into this network behind the scenes so that now the user can traverse across those connections. So I'll stop there. I'm going to turn things over to Stephanie and let her talk a little bit about her experience. And we're going to really try hard to save some time at the end for questions as well.
Hello, I'm Stephanie Kaceli. I'm director of the Maslin Library, but I also wear many other hats at the library. So I'm the one who takes care of the system and the electronic resources, and we're a very small staff. But we are, Catherine approached me to be a development partner, and it's been a really fun ride. So we're going to go through some of our experience, and Catherine was really digging deep into the stuff that gets really fun with BIBFRAME and linked data and how it all works together. And we're going to kind of readjust and see how this actually works for the user, because it's all about our students and our faculty and our community. And if we're not serving them well, why are we here? So our experience, I'm going to go back and reference the white paper that Innovative did, because this is actually what we saw. Our research office decided to throw in an extra question on a survey asking students if they thought the library was easy to use. And I have to say, I actually pitched a fit when I saw the results because they weren't great. And I wanted to start having a debate over semantics and why are you using the word easy and what do they think about this, and let's figure this out. And then I thought, wait, this is kind of why we're doing Inspire, because we want our students to be able to use the library resources and say, yes, I can find what I need easily. So why Inspire? And I'm going to start with, it's not because I just want to do something different. We all have enough to do in our day. But there is something about Inspire that really kind of tickled my imagination, I think, and got me really excited. Because I want our resources to be discovered in a way that encourages curiosity in our students. You know, I remember being a grad student, I have a master's in church history, and hours spent in the stacks, discovering books next to and around. And our students do that a little bit, but really, I want them to be able to do that online and at home and in Starbucks and Panera and wherever else I see them around our community. I also want to be able to leverage all of our resources that we are spending a lot of money for, and that it doesn't matter which database is owned by which company. So I want that vendor agnostic discovery layer. And then I'm a cataloger by trade, and I love my metadata, and I want it to be mined in a way to uncover the richness of our collection. So there let's get into that BIBFRAME, and let's keep going and digging and finding those relationships and figuring out how to make that work for our students. So this is the first impression, actually, that I had of Inspire, and I'm being perfectly honest, and Catherine knows, because we've had lots of conversations, and she knew the slide was coming. But, you know, my first impression was, we saw the mock-ups of the context wheel. I've actually had conversations with Catherine one of her first days working with Innovative, and she was bringing this idea, and it sounded great. But then we saw the context wheel and how it was working, and I'm like, okay, so what, right? Meh. And in June of 2018, I knew Innovative would be demoing it and showing it off at ALA. And we have a faculty member whose wife is a librarian in New Jersey, and she always goes to ALA, and he always goes, and he loves to walk the floor, and a couple weeks before ALA, he wants to know where he should be going. And I said, stop by the Innovative table booth and see what you think about their new search. And he called me a couple weeks later, giving me a lowdown of who he visited and what he liked, and browsing was on the top of his list. And I said, well, did you stop off at Innovative? And he goes, yeah. I said, what'd you think? He goes, meh. I'm like, oh, okay. But then we started having more conversations, and the context wheel started to get developed, and there were a lot more. You could start seeing data getting ingested on the Innovative side on their test server, and it was starting to look good. More conversations with Catherine, and then they approached us to be a dev partner, and I'm like, oh dear. But Hillsdale had signed on. Leanne is here, and so in November, after some talks, and we started to see it going, we're like, this could actually be something fun. And so we went ahead and signed on in November, December of 2018. And then our third impression came in January of 2019, and it was because our data was getting ingested, and we were getting on the sprint cycle, so we're seeing this agile development happening in a way that we hadn't seen before with Innovative. And then we have the patron account was starting to get linked, and articles we were starting to ingest, those were starting to trickle in a little bit here and there. And at that point, we were getting to see that linked data BIBFRAME idea really begin to pay off. And it was getting exciting. And so I like to say, something tells me we're on to something good. And every so often I would start humming that as I'm such a geek. But it really was actually exciting to see our data coming alive in a way that we hadn't. And a couple things happened. So then in February 2019, we decided, Hillsdale and Cairn put it in front of some of our students early. And what we did is we set up at our reference desk, we have a wireless keyboard and mouse, and we just reversed the reference and had them go off and show us how they would use this tool. And we were so surprised, which sounds awful, but they loved it. like these students sat down and they were having the best time doing and finding things that they didn't know that we had in ways that we couldn't even imagine. And one of the things that we were debating a lot in the beginning of the development was there's a lot of empty space in the design. And we as librarians, I still remember being trained, okay, when you build a website, this is where you want the information and you have it here, 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 and you fill up your space. But they actually loved the clean design with the good response time. An actual quote is the context wheel is a great place to explore. And then the workbench, which Catherine didn't really show yet, now I have a slide later on, was really well received. And the workbench at that point was really at an early development stage. And the workbench is this place where when they're searching and they might find a resource, or they might find a concept, or they might find a resource list that works well, they can just go ahead and add it to their workspace or their workbench, and they can go back to that. And they had a grand time, and it has improved so much, so it was really fun to see that at that early stage. So June 2019 came along, and the same faculty member gave me a call and said, hey, I'm going to ALA, and I was too, but he asked where he should visit. I'm like, you know what, stop by the Innovative Table, take a look at Inspire, it has a name now. And I did not tell him that we were a dev partner. I kind of kept that quiet with faculty, I didn't share. And so he called me from Washington, D.C. and said, wow. And in just 1 year, he could see how everything was starting to take fruit and be able to see those connections and make it work. And that was really exciting to hear. So this is the example of what Mark is not doing for us and what our current discovery layer and our OPAC is not able to do for us. I titled it, We Are Going on a Book, really a bear hunt. And so a faculty member asked me to add a second copy of We're Going on a Bear Hunt into our juvenile collection, move it from our curriculum, which so is on a separate record, and then add it into the Juve collection. So I was searching, I knew we had it, and I went and searched, and I'm a good Jane Austenite, and I do not use contractions when I type or write or do anything. And I typed in, we are going on a bear hunt, and I didn't get any results. And why didn't I get any results? Because there was no 246 in the MARC record. And like a good cataloger, I thought, okay, let me go add that 246. And then I thought, as a good dev partner, no, let's see what happens. And instead, I went over to our discovery layer and typed in, we are going on a bear hunt, and I got no results. It doesn't look like we have the book. I went to our OPAC, we got no results. So let me try Inspire. Typed in the same thing, and the first result there was the book, We're Going on a Bear Hunt. And one of our faculty members, when I asked them what they thought of Inspire, they used the description of, Inspire is like that bended shovel for snow shoveling, for those of us that live up north, where it actually was designed to work with the person, and the person isn't having to adapt to make that shovel work well. Whereas the straight shovel, we have to adapt to it to make it work well and not kill our back. And that's kind of what Inspire does, is it allows us, it actually adapts to us instead of us having to adapt to this new tool. So the partner process is still going on. We meet every 2 weeks, so we're not even near done. We're still moving along. And really what we do is we have just seen this great agile development, and we do sprints, and Innovative installs the latest code, and we use and test and have fun with that. And then we do comments, discussions, debates on Slack. If we notice something funny, we'll talk, or it doesn't look right, we'll discuss what we think it should do or why it, and then back and forth. And then we have a bi-weekly call with Hillsdale and the product owner, and we discuss things and how it's going and where we want to be going forward. We continue to have conversations on Slack, and then we also will work with individual innovative project owners, product developers, and then the next code is installed. And what's really funny is it's not even funny, it's actually really been neat to see how fast things have been getting developed. And an example of that is reserves, where I had a call, I shared screens of how we were doing our reserves, and they saw our workflow. So the product owner at Innovative and a couple other people, and then some follow-up phone calls, but didn't hear much for like a week or two. And then all of a sudden, in one of the bigger partner calls, they actually demoed course reserves, and all of a sudden I started seeing our professors' names showing up in our books. I'm like, oh wow, they did this already. You know, I'm not waiting 3 months till the next release to see a change in what we're able to offer our patrons. So this is the example for the workbench, and I look at it as it's not just for individual titles, and that's been really fun. So the Tolkien there is, it might not even be author, it might even be concept, and then there's a subject, and then a work, an individual title. It just kind of is everywhere, and you can have your combined searches down there. Down there on the bottom left, it's a combined search that I wanted to keep. So you can always select, and then when you select it, you then can send it back to the context field. So you can actually start combining different topics that might not have even, you would have thought were related, or say for a student, they wrote a paper in the fall, and then they write another paper on a different topic in the spring, and they can actually bring those together and see if there's anything that relates, and be able to go farther with their research. And so that's been good. And then we have our feedback, which we have lots of, we do it in lots of different ways. We have a questionnaire. I just walk up to students who I know have been using it and say, hey, what do you think? And one student, I did that to, and her response, it actually almost made me cry, because just out of the blue, I said, hey, Caitlin, what do you think about Inspire? She goes, is that the new thing we've been testing? I'm like, yes, it is. She's, well, this is what I find, and she uses it as much as possible, that she can find connections to a topic without it leading to confusion. So she doesn't go down these rabbit trails that she doesn't know how she got to. And she used, said, see, I can just do this. I just type in the New Testament, and then as the cataloger, I'm like, oh, let's drop the right? But it's okay, you don't need to. And one of the results is Empire in the New Testament. And then when you click on, if you were to click on the context field, it takes you to, I'll show that in a second. If in the old way, you click on the record to see if you want to explore more, you get your subject terms, and then you have your other authors. But in Inspire, it doesn't stop at just the 2 authors. It actually is bringing in controlled vocabulary, all of the authors from the chapters from this book. So now she doesn't, she can now search Mark Boda and see where he might intersect in this area. And it's been a really neat experience. She's really enjoyed being able to do that. And that was really cool, because it's like, wait, how are they getting those names? Oh, BIBFRAME is actually really working in linked data, and it does happen. And then I'm just gonna just by refocusing the context wheel, I'm able to go to Bible, Old Testament criticism and interpretation, and then it just opens a whole new world for the students, but they're still grounded where they started. So that's how she explained it to me, and I was like, oh, that's great. Another student who's been a student worker since 2017, she's a senior, and I was just walking by, and she goes, hey, Stephanie, I really love the new product. I'm like, oh, okay, why do you love this new product? And she just explained her use case where she was trying to find leadership assessment materials, but for business. and she was going to the normal way, how she always did it, and she said, I wasn't finding anything, and no matter what I was doing with the facets, it was really frustrating. And I decided, let me just see what Inspire will do. So she jumped on to our kiosk, and right away she found 10 sources, at least 10 sources or so, or almost out, whatever she said there, and through Inspire, and that she was really excited that she was able to do that. And there, you know, this unsolicited feedback is one of the most wonderful things in the world, and we can probably count on one hand how many times we get people giving us positive, unsolicited feedback. And so in recent years, it's been us bringing on Open Athens, and it's been bringing on Inspire. Those are the two areas where we get a lot of unsolicited feedback. And another piece from the questionnaire was that they liked the visuals and the greater ability for it to make connections for you that you might not think of on your own. And we're not paying these students anything. We're just asking them what they think, and they're just giving us their honest opinion. And here's the other feedback. And what's neat to see is we keep talking about ease of use and trying to get BIBFRAME and linked data to really come alive. And that's really what we're getting in our feedback, is that they're finding these connections that they didn't know before. In June, I got an email, we had a student, one of my student workers, she was away for the whole spring semester as we were working on this project. And she came back and she was working for us in the summer, and she's like, what can I do? And I'm like, here, just a second. I quickly type up the Inspire website, and I say, sit down, search, tell me what you think. And afterwards, she came to me and she's like, I've been working on my thesis for a whole semester, and I just found a book that I never knew we actually had, or that it fit in all the ways that she was searching. And it actually was a book that worked perfectly for her thesis. But she didn't have that before. And it's that finding those relationships. And so we're really excited. I love the last one. It really, somebody did email me back after doing the questionnaire and said, Inspire rocks. So that's a lot of the feedback that we're getting. Did you want to finish? Or?
Sure. This awkward moment at the end where we get
I know.
So I think as Stephanie's been talking, as I shared a little bit of the background for why we went down this path, we've been working on BIBFRAME forever, and sometimes it's easy to really get a little bit cynical about what's the value of this. I don't want to learn something new. All of those things. Hopefully I retire before they get around to implementing BIBFRAME. I know we've all heard that one. But BIBFRAME isn't for us as librarians. It's for patrons. It's about making our information more accessible to them in a whole variety of new ways. And the context wheel is one of those, but I think it also has a number of other benefits that allow us to really expose knowledge, expose relationships, and facilitate knowledge exploration. And one of the things that I'm thinking about as we do this is kind of, what is the role of the librarian in this environment? Is it in describing every single aspect of the book, or is it about really making connections? We don't get to sit alongside of our users as much as we used to. We are disintermediated in a lot of cases from their knowledge exploration process. So how do we take what we uniquely do, what's valued and trusted about libraries and librarians, and embed that in our data and embed that in the user experience that we deliver to them so that they are getting to the best information. It's not just to search and find and figure out how to relate things either to your intellectual need or to one another in that result list. It's certainly in the middle of this really rich world of knowledge that is created by librarians who can associate things in ways that make sense. And I think that Stephanie hit on some of the aspects from a sort of development standpoint.
really being focused on the user, understanding what the user's trying to do, what their workflow is, instead of assuming that we should do it like we always have, which is really easy to do. Let's step back and think about what the experience of our user is and what's the optimal workflow for them. And I think that really has driven some better solutions. And we've certainly iterated through the first version of the context wheel. I keep a picture of it on my wall to remind me of how far we've come, because we took the feedback that we got from that first process. There was something there, and we iterated and iterated until we got it right. And I think that, you know, it's been a great process because we've been able to be responsive to the interests that Cairn and Hillsdale and our other development partners have brought to us. And in turn, they've been able to be responsive to their users' needs. So I think that takes us to the end. I included our emails here. We welcome outreach or questions. And I know that we're probably bumping up against the end of the session, but I'd be happy to either take questions from the group or spend a few minutes after if you'd like to come up and talk to either of us directly. And I wanted to recognize Leanne Rumler from Hillsdale College as well. She's been working with us over the past year, 15 months or so, and very engaged in the process as well. So we thank Hillsdale and Leanne for the work that they've done, as well as Stephanie. So, any questions from the group?
So what discovery system or catalog system were you using before you switched to Inspire?
So we haven't officially switched. So
Right,
we are
okay, so
currently
we're-
using EDS is driving our discovery right
Okay.
now.
And what version of BIBFRAME is Inspire using?
It's using the BIBFRAME 2.0
Okay.
model, yeah.
And so does the institution continue to catalog and mark, and then you're switching it over to BIBFRAME? You're converting it to BIBFRAME at Triple-O?
Yep. So that's one of the nice things about the approach that we've taken. We can deliver all of the value of BIBFRAME without forcing libraries to go through this fairly significant change internally in terms of their operations and workflow and how they train their staff and how their staff operates. So Stephanie's team continues cataloging and mark. We slurp all of that data in. We transform it as part of the process. I always say that, I love to use technical terms, slurp, and then we explode the record, explode the incoming mark record, create those objects from the metadata. And actually, I talked about a resource. We create a resource. We're actually creating a work and an instance. And so when you have multiple versions, editions, ebook, print book, what we're doing is rolling all of those different instances up in your search results so that you get a consolidated view and something like the firm, that's a bad example in this case, but the firm only appears once, and you can see, oh, I can get it as a print book, a large print book, in Spanish. I can get it in a variety of different formats. So we're doing that work as well.
Do you have a screenshot example of that?
I don't have one in the deck, but I would be happy if you want to stick around for a minute and pull one up and show it to you.
Thank you.
The connections that you're able to surface in Inspire, is it limited to just your local OPAC? Does it connect with any of your databases that you subscribe to or article content?
Sure, do you want me to take this one? Okay, so so what we're doing is into that context engine, we are loading not just Cairn's bibliographic data, but we are loading other shared assets, and we call that seed metadata. So I talked earlier about authority data. We can load that on behalf of everybody one time into the context engine, and then everybody can match their records to that, take advantage of it. If you don't happen to have a match to an authority record, that's okay. We can create a provisional, so you're not losing any richness in your data. The other thing that we do with seed metadata is bring in article content. So we're creating a huge, the context engine is a huge database, hundreds of millions of records. Many of those are articles, obviously. And then what we do is we use the library's entitlements
to determine out of these 300 million records, which articles should be activated based on their subscription. And we can pass them back to whatever sources provide that particular resource. So in the case of Cairn, if they have access to the resource through Academic Search Premier, we'll pass them back to Academic Search Premier to get the resource. If you have it from multiple sources, we pass them back to the appropriate source. So we use those entitlements to set the appropriate holdings. And then the last piece of seed metadata that we pull in are things like, and this is on the roadmap coming, but being able to link in ONIX metadata so that when I display an author page, I not only see, here's the author, and here are all the works that this person has created, here are all the people that that person has worked with, here are all the concepts that they've written about, but I can see, here's some bibliographical or biographical information about this particular user. Same thing with concepts, being able to pull in from a Wikipedia or from one of the Grove dictionaries as an example of places where there's really rich information that we have in our collections that we don't leverage really well. What if we can get that in front of the user to give them more and more context as they're navigating through this environment so that they can make the right decisions about this is of interest, this is relevant, this is what I want, and then refocus and explore further. So a long answer to the question, but
We could talk all day.
okay. 40 minutes, it's 40 minutes. 40 minutes. So thank you for coming, we really appreciate it. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to email us, feel free to stop and see us if you're here, or we'll both be here for the remainder of the conference, and we would love to talk more.